Welcome to Unprompted, where we speak with the voices shaping the future of conversational AI. Today's guest, Rebecca Evanhoe, has helped define the practice of conversation design from multiple angles, really, as a practitioner, educator, author, and now actually a product leader. She co-authored Conversations with Things, UX design for chat and voice, teaches conversation design at Pratt Institute, and currently leads the conversation design practice at Slang.ai, where she helps build hybrid conversational systems used by thousands of restaurants across the US. Rebecca's work bridges humanistic insights and practical product development with a focus on evaluation, reliability, and the evolving role of designers in the era of large language models. We'll talk about what's changed, what hasn't, how to evaluate and scale hybrid systems, and what designers should really focus on in the years ahead. So great to have you here with us today, Rebecca. That's a big intro.
Yeah, that was really lovely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we did the whole career. Is there anything that we left out?
No, that's the gist. That's where I started and where I am now. It's slang.
Yeah, you are at Slam. I think the last time we spoke, we saw each other in New York at a conference, and you were really excited about it. You told me a lot of stuff about it, but we never really got a chance to talk about it officially today. So pretty excited about that. So at Slang, where you're building, a restaurant AI agent end to end, what are some of the things that you've learned there that have kind of shaped your design philosophy around scaling voice calls, blending deterministic, large language models, and all of that? Like, how's that changing you? Or maybe first talk a little bit also about what slang does.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. I mean, I will try to keep it to a minimum because I could talk about my work at Slang all day. As of this recording, I've been there for 2 years. And like you said, we essentially build voice AI for restaurants. When I started, my job zero was going from their V1 system and kind of rebuilding it so that it was more scalable, so that it was more modern. And initial system was like, get something better that's deterministic quickly. And then since then, we've been increasing the generative presence of our product and integrating with all kinds of reservation platforms and maturing our data practices and kind of doing all the stuff that a conversation designer dreams about. Yeah, when I started, I got to basically they were like, here's the keys to the Porsche.
Oh, nice.
Drive it. And so I really got to apply like every single thing that I've learned as a conversation designer. And in my role, I'm both the designer and the builder. So I also got to build the conversational pathways. Like I'm kind of the primary person doing that in partnership with our awesome engineers. So it was really exciting to be given so much ownership and build something the way that I really thought it should be built.
That is really nice. And I was actually talking to a different company the other day, and they had a similar thing also where you say like we're integrating with so many platforms. It's like a few very deep journeys, it seems. Like this is our industry, this is the vertical, the use case that we're focused on, but then there is so much behind the scenes, and we're just gonna take very deep knowledge and very deep integrations and then nail just those few use cases. Is that kind of what's happening there?
Yeah, one of the reasons why I wanted to join Slang was because of their focus. They're really, really focused on restaurants that take reservations. And that means we have like tons of partners we can integrate with. So we're official partners with OpenTable, with Yelp, with Triple Seat, all of these software programs that restaurants are already using. They needed voice AI that would just connect all of their systems together rather than force them to kind of manage one system one way and another system another way. They really needed everything to talk. So that was a really essential part of our like value proposition that we'd been working on from the beginning.
Yeah, and it seems that focus wins. That's kind of what I've been learning lately. That I guess slang is also evidence of that.
Yeah, I definitely feel that way. I feel like you can get a better conversation. And Slang, we also, when I joined, kind of rebuild a system to make it super scalable so that we don't have to build like individual agents per restaurant. We have like a system that kind of filters in what each restaurant needs, their policies, their content, all of their stuff. So another reason why I wanted to work on the system is that I'm kind of designing something highly customizable per location, but there's sort of like a central organizing body to it. And we can add restaurants really fast, which has been awesome to see.
How like if you the core and then the customization per restaurant, is it like 80 is the core and 20 is some modifications, or what's the ratio there?
The ratio. There's a A lot of the task-based stuff follows the same, like, sequences and patterns. I'm, like, being a little bit abstract because I don't wanna
Yeah.
too much secret sauce here, but yeah, it's we for each restaurant, we gather all of the essential information that you would expect, like how they take reservations for different party sizes. We can get their hours, we get all of, like, the business logic essentially, as well as content about the restaurant, and then our system kind of ingests that and stacks that up to build context and stuff like that.
That's really cool. Like, so what are some of the things that you've learned? Because you've taken all your knowledge from teaching, from writing, from experience. You take that to slang, then you probably got punched in the face. Like, what's the thing? Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. Like, what did you learn?
Oh gosh. I mean, of course, it's not just like a conversational product, it's a voice product. And voice is really hard. So when I first came in, a lot of the improvements I wanted to make had more to do with like the vendors we were using or like the root cause of our intent classification isn't working as high it's not performing as highly as we want it. The root cause is the speech recognition is not as accurate as we want it. So we're seeing mismatches because of that. So I really got to apply my full critical thinking skill set to find the root causes of the problems and then work with like our founders and the other PM and our engineers to figure out like where in the stack we want to solve this problem and like how do we get the best tech stack because it's the foundation. And I had never had influence on that level before. So that was really exciting to like work really closely with the engineers to evaluate different vendors and make some like system level improvements. And that was one big lesson. It's like as a conversation designer, the way I'm the owner of the user experience, the call experience. So if we don't have bargain, if our turn taking isn't right, then like that impacts the user experience. So looking really closely at the full stack was a big learning. And also, like, we did a lot of thinking and talking about when to kind of start LLMifying
Mm.
our original system, and so we were able to really quickly identify areas that, like, really can only be successful with LLM presence. And we started running experiments with, like, using LLMs for behind the scenes tasks, like intent routing and entity extraction, all these things that lots of people are doing. Using it to generate content, using it to do reflective listening. So we ran a bunch of small experiments to see where the LLM experience is beating the deterministic. So it was like a constant A/B test of like deterministic versus LLM. Where do we get the most value? Flipping things over. That was very exciting to actually get into the trenches with that.
Yeah, and they're kind of in a way related too to the first point you made. It seems where because where it's like, oh wait, we're dealing with voice. There's actually tremendous increased complexity of where the mistake could be because it could be influenced by the recognition isn't that good in voice, but where in the stack do we want to solve that problem? And then the LLM, you could run tests and where actually an LLM could contribute with some of that problem solving there as well, somewhere in the whole configuration of the product. How do you map that out? I guess the engineers, is that their core business in a way? They're probably way more familiar with, identifying the entire stack and see.
Yeah, well, I mean, we have like our kind of like product architecture level diagrams, and when we worked to dramatically increase LLM presence, we collaborated and mapped out what are the most people are using LLM like a constellation of LLM prompts, like little nodes or modules that pass information to each other and have kind of like governing logic. So we together map that out because like I'm the person coming to the table with I need these parts of the conversation to work in these ways. I need these outcomes. And they were the folks who had done tons of their own research or practice of like building LLMs from scratch and really being like in the trenches with LLMs from an engineering perspective. And we like literally mapped it out how we wanted to build it together. And our engineers are like the best group. So it was fun. It was like a fun project that we all like wanted to tackle together.
Okay, I bet. So if you look at that, when you go in and you're in that meeting, you're saying, this is the experience that I'm looking for. How do we build that? So there's LLMs on one hand being able to deliver that desired experience in a more easy way. Are there also instances where the new paradigm of technology actually makes you step away from some of that design where you maybe thought like this is how it should be, but actually you discover maybe it shouldn't even be that way anymore now that we're in this new paradigm?
Yeah, I think for us, because the sort of V1.5 system that we built was mostly deterministic, we had like something to beat. And one of the tasks that we took on was like figuring out the priority based on call volume, based on importance of like and based on performance, like what are the most important areas to focus. So I think a lot of companies who have already a classic system, are trying to figure out how to LLMify and like, can you do it in pieces? And we were able to do it in pieces. So we just like identified the parts of the conversation that would benefit the most, the parts that like, something like answering menu questions or dietary questions, those are really best served with an LLM. Only it would be too much for a classic system to do that kind of a
Yeah.
conversation with precision. So, yeah, we identified these, like, modules of the conversation that we wanted to focus on and started there. And we did start small. We ran a bunch of small experiments and did a few hackathon style projects just to, like, get into it, and that was a really beneficial approach, I think, because you learn when LLMs do what you want them to, awesome, and then you figure out how you wanna handle it.
So there's a restaurant, a lot of the journeys, you're pretty sure about what they're going to be like. And if it's so certain and so straightforward, you might still use some deterministic elements. But then, if somebody goes down a path where they have all these questions about the menu, then you just basically have the entire content of the menu uploaded and you have an LLM being able to pull information from that and sort of have a mini conversation there before going back to the main journey. It's like IKEA where you follow the path, but you can get lost in the restaurant and then you continue your way.
Yes, less of a labyrinth than IKEA. But yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the approach that a lot of people are using. Like to me, there's like different categories that you can use LLMs for. And one of them is like you can have them be like the full conversation. Like ChatGPT is just like one big conversation. But you can also use LLMs in these little componentized ways where like they might not actually have anything to do with the conversation. They have a task. Like generate one sentence that does this or figure out what entities are present. Like entity extraction is a really fruitful area. Give it the business hours of the menu and answer this one question. Like those kinds of things. Those are spaces where when you give an LLM great focus, you can, in our experience, see pretty good results with accuracy, lack of hallucination, quality of the response. You can really train it to answer in the sentence structures and the tone that embody good conversation design. So I might be a little bit of a control freak, but I want the LLM. I like the small jobs because we can get them to perform very well at those specific jobs. And then when every part of the conversation is really high functioning, then you can get these really sophisticated systems.
But you still have an incredibly strong desire to have full control over the experience. Or is that something you're letting, because that's kind of one of the things that we talk about a lot is that from conversation design to agentic experience design, where one of the fundamental differences is, you don't design really the conversation, but you design the context from which the conversation emerges, but you don't have full control over it. So I compare it with like if I want a triangle, I used to just have three lines and I had a triangle. And now what I'm doing is I'm putting three dots out there and the triangle comes into existence. So I'm designing the system and the context for the triangle to emerge. And as you're speaking, you still have that very strong conversation designer element in you where you want it to be a certain way.
Yeah, and not talking about like I want it to just read out language that I say or whatever, but the word context is so important, and what conversation designers have always done is like how many contextual factors can we will that'll influence the conversation can we bring into accord. And you can do that really well with LLMs by giving them more data and by giving them instructions for how to handle different scenarios. I find that with you know, clearly I'm biased because I like my own work, but I find that, like, if you just kinda let them cook, they don't they don't benefit the user in all these ways that we've studied we know work. So, like, an example is, like, we call a lot of other reservation making agents, like, it's a very competitive space, so there's lots of companies like us out there, and when we interact with their products, their LLMs are doing stuff that would never be advisable, like, simple things like gathering all of your reservation details and then at the very end of the conversation saying that it's not available instead of like running checks throughout. Stuff like that where it's like, oh, they're actually kind of wasting the caller's time or asking questions that are kind of socially off, just not the way you would do it. Like if your agent says, "Oh, okay, what's your name and how many people are you coming in with?" We never designed a conversation that way. Like even if your agent, it's just like two different questions and
Yeah.
it's not adding efficiency. It's actually giving people a lot to think about because it's an unusual combination that doesn't really make sense. So it would like give people pause. So I'm not satisfied with the quality of the conversation without like the shaping that that is my professional craft to like get it to these really good places.
Yeah. No, I really like that because that's, I think, I share that's where LLMs are great if you already know what you want. And I think for a lot of people that never knew how to design a proper conversation, it feels like a shortcut and it looks like something, but it's actually, there's nothing there. And if, like, it's about empathy, understanding what the user needs and wants, and being able to deliver that. Like so many conversation designers never ask, like, what's the desired behavior also for the customer? Like, what are we actually doing here? And they'll be like, oh, yeah, just answer a question. It's like, no, answer a question and instilling, leaving them with the confidence that it was the right question, that there was the right answer, and that they can move on with their lives. Kind of like there's that deeper thing of what's happening. It's like people don't just want a reservation, they want a reservation and the confidence that when they show up that there's a table for them actually there. And if you just say like, oh, make a reservation, and LM has a little conversation, if you just have a quick look, yeah, it seems to make sense. But as soon as you start playing around with that, there's just little substance.
Yeah, absolutely. And like even it's so when we talk about context, we're talking about like the human experience of context. So a good example would be like if you call and you ask to make a reservation at 7 p.m. on a Friday in a New York restaurant, it's probably not going to 7 p.m. is not going to be available. So like let's pretend there's a 7:15 and a 7:30 on one day. We don't need to offer like two alternate times. We can just say is 7:15 okay? Like offer the closest and most people are going to say yes, right?
Yeah.
So in the context of how close 7 is to 7:15, there's like one rule for that. And we can instruct an LLM to do that.
Yeah.
Don't waste time offering
Yeah.
times, ask the yes or no. Or like let's say there's two alternate times. You want 7 p.m. There's 9 p.m. and 9:30. I wouldn't go, does 9:30 work? Like you would have more like you naturally as a host.
You now need to sell it. Yeah.
Yeah, you would say, "Well, we're not open until 9, but we have a bar area and you can come in." So, that's another instruction, and all of that is the context of, like, what a person wants and what the restaurant's policies are. LLMs kind of bop along and they imitate these conversations okay, but I want excellence, and I find that that still takes a lot of craft.
Yeah, well, I think like the LLMs are just not trained for this. It's like in general, how many good chatbots have there ever been that would give you the set of how to think about it? Because the things we're talking about here are, so our background is in behavioral psychology. So the first is just like your default option, and the other one is like, oh, now I'm dealing with sort of bad news. How do I deal with, because got to say this doesn't work. There's patterns to follow for delivering bad news and then making them select this. So it's like, what's the desired behavior and what are we dealing with? And then there are just these patterns that you should use. And how do you then, in those situations, instruct the LLM to do that properly? Do you just do it almost in a transactional level, or do you use behavioral psychology where you say lead with? So we with the bad news, we basically say like, oh, we might not have it here, but I have this, and most people, we would use social proof. Most people like to come in 30 minutes earlier and just have a drink at the bar, so that that's an option. So then we're using social proof, say most people and stuff like. Do you give instructions like that to an LLM, or do you just make it more transactional almost?
I would just say we do a combo. So, like, some LLM systems and ours is like this pass parameters in and out. And so we can be precise, like if you have this data condition, and then kind of write out a natural language instruction for that data condition. That works well. Like, for example, if people say, oh, we're coming in with like 4 kids and a baby, you can instruct it. If people mention kids or babies, you can ask the baby, does it need its own seat? So we do give natural language instructions and also kind of data, like a bit of a combo. But that's interesting. So, like, one example, there are places where I do give it pretty specific information about how to word something. And I got a really good insight from Elizabeth Stoko. If you know her, she's the author of Talk. She's a wonderful, like, conversational analyst expert who does a lot of work in the conversation design community. And I was showing her just like for fun, our call flow. After everything concluded, I had the question, what else can I help with? Or like a bunch of variations of that question. But one of them was, what else can I help with? And she was like, that's actually too open-ended because, like, these conversations naturally, like, funnel. There's
Mhm.
research done on, like, you wanna give a question that sort of implies that the conversation, like,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
we both understand the conversation.
Would that be all? Yeah.
Right. Is there anything else? So the yes or no question is more instinctively comfortable, and the open-ended question sort of implies that there should be something else, which can instinctively give the person who's about to speak some pause, right? So, like, there are places where I'm just going to give it the acceptable variations based
Yeah.
on research we already have. But I'm curious if you've seen, like, what kind of results you see when you give it those, like, more behaviorally informed instructions.
So we've been involved with one big project with like an Asian super app where we really looked at, specific type of customers, then looked at what kind of persuasive strategies would they respond to best, which is, well established frameworks of what works. Like some people respond better to social proof, other people respond better to scarcity and stuff like that. And that worked very well actually. And it followed. But there's a big part of it is giving it good examples and bad examples, and be very. So if you give an LLM something like make sure to use social proof, then it will go like for centuries. People have been. It will give you like this terrible thing, right? So you got to be so that, and that's kind of comes down to like LLMs are great for people that already know what they want, and then they can do more and better work faster. But if you kind of know there's something there in behavioral psychology, you just ask an LLM to do it, it's just gonna basically show how bad you are. But yeah, it works surprisingly well. And we're also thinking now, could we actually create something that where we inject those modules into LLMs and basically offer that as well? Be kind of cool.
Yeah, you're bringing up another when I was sort of listing, like, ways you can use LLMs, another one is, like, as, like, a judge or an evaluator, and so, like, having one LLM give you, like, "These are the top 3 intents," it probably is, and this is an approach a lot of people talk about, and then having another LLM choose the best one out of the set, people see good success with that, but, like, the layer on those kinds of things in our world is that this is happening over the phone in real time.
Yeah.
And so we also have to factor in like using the smaller models that are much faster and cheaper, and like you don't want a huge contextual prompt and you don't want a huge contextual output. You just want like the right sized pieces too. So there's like a production level concern as well. Like, can it be fast enough to do all these jobs we want it to do for stacking up the jobs? And
Yeah. So at one point, context gives you diminishing returns. That's
you're asking,
kind of what you're saying then, because then it sort of takes from speed.
right. Yeah, and but I mean, it's like the most important thing, but also it's like how can we communicate context? How can we give the LLM the right context and get the right contextual response out under the time and money conditions that we need it to? So it's like an extra challenge. That is kind of a new challenge is like the processing speed of LLMs. It's not something that I had encountered working on classic systems because they're just kind of modern version of them is just kind of fast.
Yeah. I mean, we used in the old days, we would back in 2022, we often had this position when people would talk about personalization that you could often create the illusion of personalization. Because it didn't matter too much. Sometimes it's just like repeating the words back. Like it was more important to make sure that people felt understood than to actually understand what they're saying. Because if their journey was, they need this one thing, we know what it is, we can make it feel very natural, but it was actually just like hardly any tech in some use cases, and it worked. It outperformed the other stuff. So as you're saying this, I do wonder now, with all these advanced things that we can do, how much we could eventually take out again because we're getting to 90% of that same experience, but it's cheaper, it's faster, it's more reliable. So we're also like in a way doing the research in real time, seeing how far we can push it. We got all these new cool puzzle pieces. What can we create? And it's really nice, but how much of it eventually does every company still need? And some of them will probably you guys, because it is your product, you need to push it as far. But if I'm a bank or a telco, I just want to use conversational AI to talk to my customers about whatever, maybe I only need half of it. And the rest of it, I can just kind of with proper design, decrease my dependency on the technology and focus on brand or speed or whatever I need it to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I mean, we do a lot of tons of call analysis, so looking at transcripts, listening to recordings. And we have another reason why I like working at Slang is that it was founded by two data scientists. So when I showed up, they were like, "Here's a bunch of data. You can look at all the calls, you can do all this stuff." We built dashboards for me and our team to use. So we're like, we have great data. And of course, we can look at out of all of the reservation attempts, how many are completed? And we have subcategories of reasons why they don't complete. And so we can go, okay, we're going to focus on improving reservation success for this case. And what's the root cause of that case not being completed, right? So we have this awesome, precise data, and we can come up with these truly data driven, Grail, the data driven solution. I feel like because of those things, I'm able to do my best work. And because of those things, because we have all that success data and reasons, we can also figure out if an LLM is gonna where we need where we need LLMs, where are deterministic systems. Like maybe we want to modernize them someday, like a certain flow or a certain task. Maybe we someday will modernize it to LLMs, but we know its performance.
Yeah.
So we know our biggest problems and our most important problems.
Yeah.
That's hugely helpful.
I mean, and I think that's a very healthy way of looking at it. Like, and I think most brands are also understanding that. Don't throw out something that works. Just look at the data, see where you need to fix it. And if you find a serious problem, then ask yourself the question, how do we solve it? And then maybe it's not them, or maybe it's not. Maybe it shouldn't even be in a conversational experience. Maybe you should just fix your product. Yeah.
Absolutely that. Yeah.
I was actually a couple days ago. I was with someone who, how do I say this, about customer support for one of the larger phone brands. They make cell phones. A lot of people have them. um, their biggest call driver in the contact center was, how do I go from one phone to the other and take my data? And the screen was always breaking. To reduce the whole contact center pressure and conversational experiences, they just made it easier to transfer data and fix the phone. And it was like the two biggest customer support success stories were fixing the product, because they were like driving 80% of the traffic, which is like a wonderful thing. So sometimes like we're focused on the wrong problems. Different question I wanted to ask you about this, and I think you're kind of giving me the answer, and I think feel the same way. So for me, conversation design has always been like, how does the brand speak to its customers, and as a very broad thing, and therefore I don't think conversation design. It's like we now have new tools and we can do more stuff, and it's more fun, but it's like going over the data, understanding all this thing. That is what conversation design is fundamentally. Where some people say, so everything's changing, and is it still relevant? But it's like, how do you just I know how you feel about it, like reflect on sort of that transition perhaps a little bit.
Well, you know exactly how I feel. Yeah, I think for people who really focus on the levers you have to pull, like, oh, a conversation designer writes copy and they train NLU. If that has always been your view of conversation design, then it would feel different. But if your view of conversation design that I have and you have and all of our amazing peers have is like, this is the outcome that I want for the user, and these are the levers I have to pull, then we become experts at those levers, but we can use new levers. So I feel like now, to me, it's like I still want the same standards. I want this many scenarios to be handled. I know the ways I want them to be handled. I know what I'm looking for when a conversational flow is successful. I know the limits of the levers I already had. And now with these new levers, I'm working towards the same outcomes, but I can actually solve problems I couldn't before. Things I just had to live with, like, "Well, it's never gonna get better than that," are now we can do really new things. So it's exciting, but it still is the same thing of, like, figuring out the caller's context, the other conversational partner's context, figuring out the specificity of the caller's question in the ask. Are they asking a general question? Are they asking a specific question? How can we deliver them the right size amount of information for the channel we're delivering it and, solve the problem? Like, that is exactly the same. And I don't know if you've heard of this. I unfortunately don't know who coined this term, but this new term, context engineering. Have you heard it?
I've heard of it. Well, I've seen it, but not as it hasn't struck me as like, oh, that is a thing. Yeah, it's like, yeah, as a skill set specifically. It's the first time that I'm realizing that now.
Yeah, the descriptions that I've heard of it are like, "Oh, you use context to figure out, like, what kind of scenarios you need to handle, and then you, like, make this happen." And I'm being a little imprecise because it's kind of a newer concept, and I would credit the person, but I'm sorry, I don't know the person who originally coined it. But, like, I'm like, "That's conversation
Yeah.
time, baby." Like, I'm, like, pulling back the curtain, like, "Welcome, we're all here."
We've always told it. Yeah, exactly. We exist. I like it because it's kind of, it's conversations to be done. It's like, what does the customer want and how are we going to use a conversation to help them do that? And I think in the NLU world, we discovered that how you had full control over what the system said, but writing that copy was the underutilized lever. And actually, like, if you just leaned into that lever, then wow, the results would improve. And that's kind of how CDI started, and that's where we were really strong and still are really strong. And now all of a sudden we just have more levers. And yeah, there's more stuff to play with, but it doesn't make the some situations you lean into this lever, then that one becomes more important. And then for me, it's like you could control entirely how the system would speak, and you could have tremendous control over that and really optimize for that through copywriting. Now you're dealing with a system where or a situation where you don't control what the user says and you don't entirely control what the system says, but you control the stage and the context where the conversation takes play. So there are some changes, but ultimately it's like there's a customer that needs something and we're going to use a conversation to help them achieve it. And then there's not that much different at the same time. And it's just getting more exciting.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. And I can talk about some specific examples of like prompt evaluation because that's something
Yeah.
we want it. I think you see a lot of articles that I think are pointing in the right direction that like we need to evaluate LLMs to make sure that the output is what we want. We can't just assume they're going to do what we want. And for us, the Y I mean, I think a lot about designing the experiment for what you want to learn. So, to use, like, one example, if you want an LLM to answer questions about the business hours, and this is a huge category of questions. When are you open?
Yeah.
Are you open on Friday? Are you still open today? These are all different questions. These are very contextually different questions. And you also wanna make sure your LLM is never gonna lie because you don't want someone to show up you're like, "Oh, are you still open?" "Yes," and then they show up, and then the restaurant's closed. That's a really bad experience. So, we followed a process where we made data sets of, like I used my knowledges to cover all of the cases of, like, hours questions using real user utterances. We made this data set to evaluate can an LLM with complete accuracy answer all of these questions, not just for one businesses, but for different businesses. So we got our list, our matrix of like user utterances, and then we used different restaurants with different hours patterns, ones that are open morning to night, ones that are only open for dinner, ones that are closed Monday, Tuesday, and used our prompt to generate what the LLM would say. And then we did do human evaluation on accuracy. And we are looking for a signal of like how far do we need to go? If the LLM answers these questions, great. then we don't have much further to go. And that's terrific news. What a blessing. One thing
We'll take it. Yeah.
that's great. But if there are certain question categories or certain business structures and we had to add instructions, so then we could iterate our prompt, run it again on the set and evaluate it. And then once we feel confident that the LLM is consistent, then we switch over to like an LLM judge that monitors it. So I really like that system because I need confidence that it's performing before I can like unleash it. And we can get hallucinations to a minimum. And we did that process on a bunch of these little super important pockets. We also did a lot of evaluation with translation, both the process I described, and we worked with a conversation designer who's also has a PhD in Spanish linguistics and had their expert counsel. And we also did usability testing of having Spanish speakers place test calls in like a beta version that we recruited from Craigslist. So we were getting like, are we getting the kind of analytics that we want? Is the actual translation output the quality that we're expecting from an expert perspective? And then we're having real people call and we're going, is this good enough for you? So luckily I get to like be as demanding as I want, but we really are looking at it from all these different angles. So I think there's evaluation work is really very fruitful. Like it is the way that you can gain confidence or like rapidly iterate on
Yeah.
LLM based systems.
I'm thinking now the mix of course, you're not just in New York, but New York comes up a lot. There's a lot of tourists too with French, Dutch accents calling in broken English. How are you dealing with that specifically?
That's a good question. I mean, the best solution to that is to get the best speech recognition vendor that you can.
So, yeah, just spend money if you could get someone else to solve that problem. Yeah.
And there's great ones, right? Like the problem is getting better all the time, but it's still tricky. But we do have like language detection for Spanish. So if people begin speaking in Spanish, then the conversation can switch over completely into Spanish and do all the same things. So that's what all of this like translate
Yeah.
research that we did was for. We are seeing a lot of success with that, which is really exciting to me because I had never worked on a multilingual system before.
Yeah, and is there any does slang want to go to different countries and add therefore maybe you go operate in France and you're adding French altogether, or we still US focused, or what's the plan?
We are in the US and Australia. And as you can imagine, there is a lot of planned activity in terms of like increasing our multilingualism for the product, moving to other countries.
But that's what I like about, companies like this where focus is so key. Because it could have also been very tempting to stay in the US, but to offer more, but you're just applying that same focus in different languages and regions. So that's still how do you do more within the same focus, right? Because you could have also said, let's now also do car garages and or test drives and go into whole different industries with the same stack.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and you have so many things to figure out because we're in several thousand restaurants and like that's rapidly accelerating and we get a million calls a month and that's rapidly accelerating. So like, we have to make sure that everything we do can scale. So to figure out how we wanted our agent to do multilingual and like other dialects and stuff, there's infrastructure and tech stack considerations, there's quality, there's speech recognition considerations, there's output language considerations, we're in telephony, so there's zip codes and phone laws. So we had to kind of figure out, what does it look like if we stick in the US and add another language? What does it look like if we go to another country? And a lot changes in that context. We have to time zones figure out
Oh god, yeah.
the nightmare. And then we go, okay, so what does the infrastructure look like for a system? Yeah. And so we took really smart slices of that, I think, and then you're kind of poised to like rapidly add more once you get all that stuff figured out.
Yeah, and when you say the number of calls at a million rapidly increasing, what do you see about people's behavior to just pick up the phone more and more again? Because everybody's like, everybody wants to go digital. They want to text and this and that. At the same time, everywhere call volumes are increasing. What do you make of that? What do you see?
It's interesting. I think a lot of people are still expecting for restaurants to be a person that answers the phone. Like if you call your bank, you don't really expect a person. If you call a restaurant, a lot of people do.
Yeah.
And so there is a little bit of like hesitancy that we can see. And the best way to overcome it is to do the smartest thing we can the soonest we can do it. Can we give a really good answer at your first question? If you say, "Is this a robot?" Have a graceful answer to that. Like um yeah, I definitely feel like people are getting more willing to engage with this agent. Definitely will. I am proud to say that we see a lot of like people actually booking a reservation and then going, wow, or like, that was great. Not you were great, but that was great. Like they know
Mhm.
they're talking to a system and they're like, this robot works. So I do think people are, I don't know, okay with the idea that if a system proves itself to be good, they're willing to, like, go along with it. That seems
Yeah.
a little bit more getting more traction.
So there's this framework on a memory experience that we've been working on quite a bit. Basically, if you interact with the robots, it can be very good, but it doesn't add a lot to your memory experience. And the brand value is basically the total sum of all memories that I have of that brand. And one could be really bad, and then it's like a devil effect that basically erases all good experiences, or the halo effect, where one experience was so great that I actually forget all the crap that they told me. In if you look at customer support use cases, we talk a lot about if you automate everything, then it basically hurts your brand ultimately because it won't contribute much to the memory experience. So it's good to have call center agents as well. But in your case, you automate and it might be efficient, it might be acceptable, and especially if more restaurants are doing it, but you still have the restaurant experience itself. And that's where the memory is created with the interactions that you have there. So as long as you get the reservation and you give the right and it works, it's like it's do or die on the night itself. But you could start that evening 10 points behind if your automated agent is bad.
Exactly. One of the things that I like about working in the restaurant space is they care a lot about hospitality, like a lot. They don't want callers frustrated ever.
Yeah.
So their interest and tolerance for having calls forwarded is a lot higher than like a bank or an insurance company where like the request is that
Automated, yeah,
it
yeah.
to not ring. So we try to make our agent really good, but we also there are certain types of calls the restaurant may want to handle, like a catering call or something. We're going to forward all the calls they want us to forward. We're not going to make callers feel trapped, and that feels a lot nicer. And also our agents, like the restaurant use cases that like you want much more like warmth and like friendliness in the tone of the brand, which is interesting. It's, like, a little less buttoned up than
Yeah.
some of the other systems I've designed for. So it's nice to work kind of in this space. But what you're saying about memory context is interesting. And, yeah, I think the phone part should be, like, really easy and fast so that whenever they show up, they're neither the staff nor the guest has any surprises, and everybody can just, you know,
Yeah.
go on with a nice evening.
Well, I mean, that is really impressive if you put in some weird request to an automated system on the phone on the fly. Let's the baby seat that you mentioned earlier, when there's kids and you go to your table and it's already there, then that's like, wow, that's like a halo effect immediately. Like these people know what they're doing, and that it does actually contribute to it. But if you put in a request and they haven't looked at it and it's not there, it's not the end of the world. But then if they had run out of baby seats and they didn't even remember, then it is really bad. But I guess that could still also happen when an intern picks up the phone and forgets to write it down.
Yeah, but you're calling out something really important, which is like that our voice AI is not just for the guests, it's part of the restaurant team and it can fill in some of those gaps. So like we can take a reservation request and add it to the notes. And when the staff comes to trust it, then they know those requests are there. And we also have really beautiful interfaces so that the restaurant staff can see the calls and what happened on the calls. They're just getting actually a lot more information than they had before so that they can really focus on fulfilling the requests in the restaurant and being extra hospitable and making sure that the guests are getting what they asked for. So it is really uplifting when not the manager or the restaurant owner who purchased this product likes it, but when the staff really likes it,
Yeah.
that almost means
I
more.
mean, it becomes their digital colleague rather than the automated system. there's like one person, all they do is pick up the phone, write it down, and the other people rely on it. And the guests, when they show up, it's like their digital colleague has taken care of it. I mean, that is, I mean, that's really nice when it works out that way, which says a lot about, I guess, the founders and the product team there to be able to capture that spirit of hospitality. And I think that's kind of what you said earlier too. It's like, oh, some people, yeah, your competitors, it's like, here to LM, do the reservation. It's like, yeah, but getting the reservation is not what hospitality is. It's like all the little things and the little touch points that add up to that one wonderful performance of going a night out. I'm now thinking very nice restaurants, but I'm sure there's also like the simple burger place around the corner that's using your system as well. But yeah,
Yeah.
so when you look at conversation, we talked a lot about this now, but like where it's headed, yeah, what are some of the beliefs that you maybe had to rethink? Because I mean, when you wrote the book, this wasn't there. What are some things now where you feel like some of your beliefs you had to rethink, or how you're approaching transparency, control, new skills that designers need to stay relevant?
Love that beginner's mind. I think that evaluation piece was always there, but it's more important than before. You need to be able to determine what standards you're trying to set and evaluate those standards. And I think the conversation designer is really the person explaining, like, these numbers are telling us this story about the guest experience and the root cause that the human is having. And when we fix that, we should see these numbers change in this way. Like, when you can do that, I think, like, you become very powerful to the business that you work with. That piece is hard to learn unless you're already like, where are you gonna get production data for a conversation system? It does kind of introduce a chicken and egg problem.
Yeah, but there's an element of just critical thinking. And I think there's like being to being able to rely on those on sort of core principles, which I think a lot of people got nervous when all the new tech came out, where they started to chase and felt that they were in a competition to know more about this LLM and that LLM, and then you think you know, and then there's a new headline. But the core is like this customer has a problem. We feel a conversation would help them. Then there are certain elements in a conversation that is going to help them more. So that's what we want. Now let's see if the system is delivering that, and how do we write a test for checking if it is delivering that, and then if it's not, how do we influence it? So there are like fundamental, like it's almost like you need to be confident enough to be able to rely on sort of fundamental principles that don't change as the technology changes.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's not to say that, I don't know, something would change in the like, we're not inflexible when we're saying there are these kind of like long lasting things. It's just that, to my view, I still think a lot of the classic stuff applies. Although I think it is like, for to be really concrete, I think a skill, it's really tricky because, like, I would like to never train another classic NLU system in my life. I would like to be done. And I might get to be done. I might get to be done, actually, but we still are training an LLM to do that with precision using the same principles. But I do think it is a little easier to practice if you're a conversation designer and you want to practice making an intent classification LLM prompt. You actually can do that on your own and, like, kind of mock up experiments and prove it out yourself. I think that's something that's a little more accessible, and that skill to me looks, it's like same outcomes, but I think it's
Yeah.
a little bit more straightforward, less laborious to do that.
Yeah, so then maybe a skill is to properly understand where the LLM is the solution and where it is almost like something that helps you get to the solution faster. So do I want to use an LLM, or do I want to use the LLM to train the NLU faster? So that's like understanding the difference between those two solution types for an LLM. Yeah, basically what is then the skill. What's an LLM and what do I use it for? And then because generally the L because everybody was like, "The LLM should do the conversation." It's kinda like the last thing you wanted to do on the list of all the things it could do in conversational AI, like, that's the last thing you're getting to. So understanding the different applications and when it makes sense in a bigger stack. And then you're saying you could experiment that because you don't need all the data yet. That's something that if you can demonstrate that, that would be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've used this analogy before, but sometimes with LLMs, it gives me the feeling of like being at a kid's birthday party and there's a pinata and the kid is the blindfold and they're swinging with the bat and you're like, to the left. "Oh, no, go forward. Oh, no, you turned around. Okay, turn around back toward," it feels like that, and I'm like, "Give me the bat. I can get the candy out," but maybe it won't always feel
I
that way.
might ask to use that. I'll quote you. In my next presentation, I might do a picture of a pinata. I really love that analogy. But yeah, you're right.
That's exactly how it feels.
That's I think that's actually a very good point. So as we're getting to the end here a little bit, we're gonna do some, quick fire question. We'll do a little bit of speed route. So first of all, what's an AI tool that you cannot live without?
We use a tool. I'm not gonna say the name of the tool, actually, just because we might be switching. There's a classification of tools where you can take an LLM prompt and input data and run an experiment and simulate results. And you can run it with different models and you can set up evaluation matrices. So when we're going through our process of like, we're testing the LLM output to get it good enough to put into our production, that tool is really essential because it's like the hub where we go through and grade the results. Like we have a team of people who do some of our grading and we'll set up the grading matrix and have them grade the results. And it's really easy to iterate on LLM success that way because you do need to evaluate LLMs with like volume.
Yeah.
Those tools make it really efficient. So to me, that tool feels really essential. And there's also tools where you can have LLMs act as fake testers and like
Oh yeah.
a system. I think those are getting more valuable as well. So those are tools that help us do some testing at scale before we go to production.
That's nice. People can write those down. And the biggest hype in AI that you'd like to see a little less of.
Uh, I want to see less of the sentence. If you aren't doing X, you're already behind. I don't want that sentence anymore.
Okay.
That sentence is almost never true.
Almost feels like a subway take. A one book or a resource that you would recommend to every designer.
I was gonna grab it before the interview. I'm like, it's over there. Transforming conversational AI.
Hmm.
I think it's really good. I think it's more technical. I think it's one of the more technical versions of a book for our craft. But I think it's really important to understand how LLMs work. It's new and I think like our book is really like readable and friendly, but it's more about the user experience and I think this book is like if you want to technically level up, this is the one that I've seen that feels like
Yeah.
modern and like of the moment.
Yeah, and those two together would kind of give you the whole spectrum. And then add a CDI core, and then you're ready to go. What frustrates you most about LLMs? You've given us a whole list today, so if you gotta pick one thing now.
It's the pinata problem. It's the nudging. I mean, it's the same thing in our book. We talk about classic systems and optimizing a classic system as like loading a canoe. So you like add some stuff over here, it starts to tip. That problem still persists with LLM.
What excites you most about where AI might be in 2 years?
I'll give a really practical answer. Figuring out as a field, like us as individual practitioners with our tech teams and as a field, how to actually use these things for real is really hard and exhausting. Like it's like all we've been talking and thinking about since like 2022. And I think it'll finally get a little easier for us to know best practices and oh, this is generally how we want to do that. Like getting to a place where there's less unknowns I think will feel really nice for those of us who are kind of in the weeds with these things.
Yeah, a colleague Willem keeps saying that it's like there's just so much going into these contexts that's part of it. You have no idea. And every day there's like, oh, I guess that's part of it. It's like, oh, we're touching that too. Yeah. So what's a belief about conversational AI that you recently had to change?
That I had to change. A really simple thing. I never used to like when something would say that it's like, I'm an AI assistant. I never really cared for that. But I think there's legal reasons and user experience reasons why that's seeming a lot more important to me. So I think there still is a lot of openness and a lot of best practices to land on for like how AI discloses itself in ways that feel familiar in ways that callers can move past smoothly. Because it is like a California law where you have to like disclose that it's
Yeah.
AI and so yeah, I think being more explicit and introducing itself as a feels more important to me. than in the past. I used to kind of like poo poo it.
What's the key skill or mindset you look for in a great conversation designer or team member? Like, what's the thing you would be looking for now?
You said it earlier. It is that like critical thinking and able to get to the root cause. And able to get to the root cause of a problem that's really unfamiliar. Like if you're looking at a transcript and something went wrong, being able to figure out, is this a conversational pathway issue? Is this an LLM issue? Is this a speech recognition issue? Like where in the stack it failed. If you can develop those diagnostic skills, I think that's valuable for any task, but it's like a must have for a conversation designer.
I think we're answering the next question as well. What's the skill set that's hardest to or most underrated? I guess that's the one too. Then
It's hard.
sometimes there's like a different answer to that question, but today there's not. And so looking at 6 months ahead, we just talked about what we're hoping for 2 years. But what are you personally going to be focused on the next 6 months at a strategic level? What are you trying to accomplish?
Yeah, the next 6 months, I will probably be delving more into, I mean, in my work, like multilingual stuff. I think I'll be able to get out of the trenches of like pathways and LLMification and get more into the fun part, which would be like more like personalization and branding. Like getting our system works with brand concepts like, but getting more into that, like how do we differentiate an AI for a specific brand? Getting back into that work that's a little bit more, I don't know, more creative, more fun than like the numbers game. That's something I'm excited about too.
How does the If you look at with so many restaurants where there's customization, but a lot of it's the same. When you look at sort of a branding framework, are you going like cuisines, size, locations, and those all, it's like a matrix with brand attributes that will sort of land there, and then there's a little customization on top of it. So small Mexican in a big city versus a big Mexican restaurant in a mid-sized city, do they have different attributes?
I think they do. There are definitely like patterns for like some chain restaurants that we work with that take reservations, but are meant to be a little less casual or a little less formal. And then we have some like Michelin star restaurants that are really picky. And we definitely see some patterns. But if we're listening to our restaurant operators, what's really interesting is like these restaurants are like, for a lot of them, their life's work. Like their restaurant is this incredibly special thing that they've built from the ground up, and their brand is their life. And
Yeah.
so they do really like it. They want individual control. They don't want to be like part of a segment. They're like, we do it this way. We train our hosts to speak this way.
Yeah.
Use these words. We talk about things this way. They really do want that level of precision. So I think we're thinking about like how can we build ways for the customers to give that input, almost like the concept of training a host.
Yeah. Yeah, but then you would still, if I hire someone for my Michelin place to be a host, by the time the training starts, I've already gone through the recruitment process. So I'm already starting with something, right? So you could also here start with certain attributes that are like Michelin, big city, prestigious, or creative. Like there's different things and start from there. And then you start the customization because you wouldn't start customization from scratch because you wouldn't hire a random person off the street either.
Right. I do think there is kind of like a center slice of like professional language that restaurants use where like good evening, how may I be of assistance might be one end, and then most people are like, how can I help you today, kind of in this space, and then like, what's the word, y'all, or like, oh here, so
That's where I'm going.
yeah, there is kind of like a central slice that's okay, but we really do see people wanting to customize in the word level. Like I train my staff never to say X and always to say Y, which is interesting because we also want our LLM to be one of these model employees.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, this is fun. Could do this all day, but
We could do it again. That's the good thing about the interwebs. We could do this way more often.
part two.
Well, yeah. No, thank you for taking the time, and I learned a lot. It's really cool to see you at such a cool product company and the deep knowledge and having the theory and the application and being able to share that here with our audience today. So thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah, thanks. This was awesome. I'm a huge CDI fan, a conversation designer that we just hired. Actually, got a lot of training from CDI back in the day. So I'm glad we're all part of the same community.
Yeah, we should do more stuff together. Thank you, everybody, for listening. This was Unprompted with Rebecca Evanhoe.